Well, adding to its woes, the Black Sash has launched a constitutional court application against SASSA to protect social grants. Now, for more on this developing story, we're crossing now to our reporter Annika Larsen in Cape Town. Now, this story, Annika, has gone in various directions over the last few weeks, let alone the last few days. Talk us through this very latest development.
Hi Marcel. So what's actually happened less than half an hour ago is that SASSA has approached the Constitutional Court much later than they were expected to ask for an urgent interim order for permission to start renegotiating with Cash Paymaster so that they can extend that unlawful contract for them to continue to roll out the disbursement of grants on the 1st of April, and that there'll be no interruption in that rollout. Now, what's interesting about this urgent application for permission to renegotiate is that Treasury's role in this. In these court papers here, it quite clearly says that Treasury does not support the extension of an invalid contract, and that means that an emergency measure, and the critics are saying that this has become an emergency measure, a self-made emergency measure on purpose by the minister and SASSA, so that CPS can negotiate and ask for whatever it wants and really hold a gun to SASSA's head, if you like, so that the rollout happens on time and as expected to really the poorest of the poor. And Treasury is saying we want the Constitutional Court to make sure that this rollout is done on acceptable terms and with fair procedure, because they're not prepared to dish out willy-nilly any cash amount to CPS for the extension of this contract, which has been named as unlawful. Now, SASSA is saying they need another year. They're not going through tender procedures in this interim time. The papers here say they're not in a position to go on tender for this interim period. So I'm not sure if the lady at SASSA was talking about a different part of the tender process. But it says that they need at least a year to make sure they themselves, SASSA, are really ready to do the rollout themselves. And what these papers really tell us is that they're giving the Constitutional Court and SASSA and CPS, should they get the go-ahead, very little time to negotiate an acceptable renewal of contract, extension of contract. And you've got to remember that when government goes into emergency measures, Marcel, for instance, if there's a drought and a municipality urgently needs to get water to a community, they no longer have to follow a tender process that has to tick all sorts of boxes. They can pretty much do what they need to do to get that water to people who are desperately thirsty. So this is a similar situation, and Treasury is saying, hold on, we want the Constitutional Court to have a look at this and to oversee and make sure that this extension process is done properly. We're not just going to hand out cash, and SASSA therefore is asking the Constitutional Court for an urgent permission, if you like, to start this re-extension process. Now, they've given the Constitutional Court permission, or they're asking for them to issue directions by Friday. And if you think about it, if this is argued in court, which I suspect it will be, that gives the court and all the acting parties very little time to get together to start this negotiation process. It's really just a matter of days.
Now, emergency seems to be the key word in this entire story right now. We really are running against the clock for those payments to be made in just about a month's time. We're talking about 17 million social grants here. In your opinion, or in your experience, what weight will the Constitutional Court give the urgency of the livelihoods of all of those people in a case such as this?
Well, the Constitutional Court prides itself on being a court for the people. That's why it was established, to be the final oversight body protecting all South Africans. And if you're looking at South Africans that need protecting, we're looking at the most vulnerable. Some households run entirely on grants, and if there are no grants, or grants come in late, and as the Black Sash is very concerned about, if there's too much money unlawfully taking off grants and disability communities, people will die. People will go hungry. They won't be able to survive. And so the Constitutional Court, I'm sure, and some critics are saying they really have a gun held to their head, because the Constitutional Court would never want to see people starve and be in this terrible, terrible position. So I suspect that the Constitutional Court will say yes to SASSA. And what's interesting is that SASSA at the very end of their submission say, I accept, and this is from the CEO, I accept that there may be criticism as to the tardiness of SASSA's conduct, but this should not prevent the right decision in the circumstances. And that's kind of rude, because SASSA, I think the minister told, the SASSA told Parliament that they were going to go to the Constitution, they'd be able to file to the Constitutional Court by the 9th of February. That didn't happen. We understand that there was behind the scenes back and forth arguments within SASSA and the minister. Then there was a new date set, I think, for the 13th. That didn't happen. So the tardiness, yes, really is on SASSA's side. We don't know if it's SASSA or the minister ordering SASSA, but really the Constitutional Court has no choice. And I'm sure that the Chief Justice will not be too happy about that.
We'll leave it there for now. I'm sure ENCA will be covering the story as it develops over the coming hours and indeed days. That's our reporter Annika Larsen from our Cape Town studio.